Welcome to episode 5 of the Corner Booth podcast. I'm Aaron Rand along with Bill Brownstein and Lesley Chesterman, and today our special guest, Valerie Plante. All right, as I said, thank you for being here. So we're going to launch
My
right
pleasure.
into it because we don't want to keep you here forever, although I understand you will be taking home a smoked meat sandwich. So
Absolutely.
that's good news.
Smells good in here.
Let me start with, we each have some questions we want to ask, so
Yeah.
I'll start with the first one, which is housing, because it turns out housing was the number one issue for voters, according to a poll last week. You promised the city will spend $800 million to buy land that it already owns to build affordable and social housing units. So what will be the difference this time around? Why should people suggest that will actually happen?
So just to be sure about the numbers, because during our first mandate, we promised to do 6,000 affordable and 6,000 social housing, and we've reached that objective. Now what we're saying is that we want to move even forward in terms of affordable housing, because what we're seeing is that the middle class is having trouble to even buy a house or find a place to stay. So with the 60,000 units, it's a way to, in the long term, it's not only for over 4 years, because it's going to take longer than that, but it's a major investment. And one thing I want to bring up is that affordability is important, but we also want to make sure that it's a long-term affordability. So this strategy is to make it, to keep those units and house affordable over 40 years. So that is important because it will support the market that is going high and high right now.
Can I just ask with respect to, and people will always say this at the end of one term into another, you're making this promise now. Where was this 3 years ago or 2 years ago or even a year ago? Why now?
It's important.
City owns
it's
this
a very
land.
good questions because, when we talk about housing, the city doesn't have that many tools. It's often the provincial and federal that gives us the money. But what we've decided to do during our first term is to create new tools. Now we are the first buyers on more than 250 land. We gave a notice saying, if you're selling this land, the city has to be the first to say yes or no, so we can then build housing. We've created the 2020 bylaw also that makes sure that now promoters, developers needs to create 20% affordable, 20% social housing, and 20% for families. We've never seen that before. So during those 4 years, it's almost like we've created we created the tools, and we've put money in the budget so we could go with this measure now. So I'm really proud of that. There's no way we could have done that with how the Department of Housing was when we took office.
Okay. Bill?
Yes. One thing I have to say is that you've done an amazing job of making us aware that if we don't go green, we're going to die. And I mean, essentially, it's true. I mean, you become more and more aware, and I appreciate that. But I'm thinking, is it a do-or-die situation? Like, can you have a bustling downtown and still be green? Because I look at what's going on, with the construction, with everything else, with the lack of tourism, with 60% of all the office buildings downtown not even being used at this point in time, and yet it's gridlock everywhere. I can't get people from the West Island, from the South Shore, from Laval to come into the city because they say it's a nightmare. I understand your point of view that you have to make the city livable, sustainable, and we have to do something there. But is there a solution that we can have a bustling downtown and still a greener life?
This is a very good question because you're right. There has to be a balance between the different priorities. And like you were saying, we're coming out of a pandemic. It's not over, but we did a good job. I think I want to thank all Montrealers for their efforts. So now I find that it's a great opportunity to make this economic recovery green and inclusive. And so, yes, we need to make sure that as we're building stuff, whatever it's the REM, or it's a bus line, or we need to make sure that there's a benefit for users, a benefit for Montrealers, whatever they live in the East Island or the West Island. And it's not an easy one. When I talk about balance, that's what is needed. But for me, I just want to say over and over that there's not only one solution to even, save our planet. And I've always thought that if we give options like interesting, fast, accessible public transport options to Montrealers, then they will feel more comfortable to leave their car on, at home. But for now, for a lot of people on the West Island, that's not even possible.
Right.
So this is why we need to come forward with the electrification of buses, having reserved bus lines, and at the same time making sure that if you use your car, there's a place you can park downtown, or you won't be stuck in traffic. But that being said, that is not it's not how it is right now. We're pretty much stuck in traffic all the time. And the reason for that is not only are we making big construction for the long term, but also there's always more and more cars circulating in our city, which is very sad. But after the pandemic, a lot of people decided to leave their good habits of using public transport, and they're using their cars. So we need to reverse this tendency.
You had mentioned that you were cutting down 40%.
Yes.
Of road construction.
Yeah.
Where
What
is
street? What
Where
street
was
is that
that?
on?
Where?
Nobody
Like,
saw
where
it.
is
Yeah.
it?
where is it?
Well, it's a good question, because though we did reduce by 40%, because Montreal said to me, okay, we're tired, there's too much. So we said, okay, let's adapt. I think that's the role of a mayor, is to adapt. But the city of Montreal only managed 25% of all the construction sites on the island. So it could be Hydro-Québec, Énergir, it could be the federal, the provincial, the bridge, all these
private
things.
condos.
Private condos. And we're kind of happy that the economy is rolling so well. But it also comes with the downsides of having a lot of construction sites for private condos and other things.
Your plans for the Oscar Peterson,
Yes.
I think is beautiful. The thing for Berks and all but I just wish we could actually move people to come see that. I mean, you're dealing with like competition like crazy. At Distrante, on the South Shore, you've got
True.
Laval is crazy. Do you think one day we can compete? This was a jewel in the
Absolutely.
crown.
Yeah, because it's St. Catherine Street, right?
Right.
And the Oscar Peterson's going to be amazing. So actually our goal as an administration is to compete with those shopping malls and those places. And when you travel around the world, you see that people are actually visiting streets, business streets, merchant streets, because they're interesting. There's places where they can gather, maybe be with the kids, have a drink somewhere where it's pleasant. Where St. Catherine Street before was stuck. People couldn't walk around. It was very difficult. So we want to we want St. Catherine to shine. And once we get to that, of course, we're going to be in I'm sure that people will say, let's go on St. Catherine rather than the discount. I'm confident.
All right, let me give Lesley a chance. I know you have a couple of issues specific to you as well.
Right.
So let's go ahead and get to those.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up, of course, it's my kind of specialty, the whole restaurant
Yes.
scene, chefs, restaurateurs. Restaurateurs in the previous administrations as well have always had kind of complaints with mayors, and social media has really inflamed this because they're posting pictures of their restaurants with gravel in the front, and this has been going on as a restaurant critic for 20 years. I'd say it was going on for the 20 years as a restaurant critic. People really suffering because of construction in front of their restaurants. And I think that the chefs and restaurant owners are feeling like, even provincially or even federally or even municipal politicians are trying to play fair and not play up our restaurant scene. So I'm just wondering, speaking maybe for the people in the restaurant scene, but also the restaurant goers, I have a long question.
No,
but
I understand.
the first one is about how to help. I've noticed lately that even chefs who are tagging you on social media saying, Valerie Plante, you took away my benches, you dug up my sidewalk. So I feel that they're really using social media to get directly to you, and a lot of things have been done to help them very quickly. But the second thing is, how can we as Montrealers, even pre-pandemic, work on making our restaurant scene the world-class scene it deserves to be?
That is such a great question, because I think we have this treasure in Montreal, which is this foodie scene. Like, people travel more and more to go into cities where they have this amazing restaurant. They even reserve online before they get in the plane, right? And this is what Montreal is all about. We're right now in a very famous deli in a neighborhood, and tourists might come in NDG Côte des Neiges, having food here, then walk around and shop in different stores. So this is what I'm in. My vision for the food, the restaurant scene for Montreal is that. How do we support the big ones that have a huge reputation, but also smaller ones,
Absolutely.
so people visit. And so we decided to work with restaurant owners and the businesses to create the Office Montréalais de la Gastronomie, which is a way to really support that network of restaurants. So that's kind of the big picture on how coming out of the pandemic, reinforcing, giving lots of love and support to the restaurant scenes. Now, the day-to-day is very crucial, like you said, because the experience of a restaurant or a store starts on the sidewalk, not only when you're in it. So this is why, for me, when we think about remaking St. Catherine better and enjoyable and easy to access, also supports those restaurants and places. So I'm glad that some restaurants are asking us, like, hey, what about my situation? And I think it's important that we hear them and we support them like we've been
Do
doing.
you like when they do that? Sorry to interrupt you, but when I see it, I'm
yeah.
like, ooh, is that a way for them to reach out to you?
I mean, there's other ways. We support so many, like we
Right.
find solutions all the time, but it's not on social media. You know, I mean, that's in the air now that people are like kind of sometimes not happy and it goes right away on social media.
Right.
To be honest, I know what we've been doing. We've been reducing by 16% the taxes for small businesses, and that really affects. That is real money for restaurants. So I know what we've been doing and being proactive. Now, if it's a cry for help, you know what? For me, ultimately, is let's find a solution. And sometimes it's difficult because if you're doing construction of an entire street, it has to be done, and after it will be nice. But during the pandemic, it was great to work with restaurants. I'm glad that the federal and the provincial did help with salaries and paying the building of itself. But to me, it will also always be about supporting small businesses, mom and pop shops, those that makes Montreal so vibrant.
Unique, yes.
Unique,
yes,
unique,
yes.
exactly.
Yes, yes.
I want to go back to one thing which we have not talked about because it's actually just in the news over the past week or so, and that's for whatever reason, language policies have now
Yes.
come up in a municipal election, which I'm sure we were all hoping wouldn't happen.
Absolutely.
The case of Joe Ortona being, dumped by Ensemble Montréal. But beyond that, people are now saying you should tell people what you think with respect to Bill 96. Now, I know your party's already come out and said you support the bill. No one's arguing that French shouldn't be protected or promoted. But what about English being protected? Where do you stand on that?
I'm very glad you're asking this question because I believe that we need to be very transparent. I've always been transparent and clear, and I'm not changing my mind depending to who I'm talking to. So yes, I'm for Bill 96. That being said, I've always been really proactive in supporting other languages. We shouldn't be putting them against one another. So that's why we've decided to put an action plan saying, yes, French is the official language of Montreal, and we love it. But then, what do we do to valorize and to support other language communities? It's very important. So ultimately, what I want to say is that I will always support Anglophones, for example, or allophones to get services at the municipal level in their language, which is supported by, for example, the Bill 96 is now re-questioning that for Pierrefonds-Rexborough or even here at NDG Côte des Neiges. It's important that if you speak another language that you get your service. But I'm really attached as well to French, that it should be kind of a social glue. But let's not put them in opposition. And my message hopefully is very clear, and I will not change my mind.
But just to understand, part of Bill 96 talks about boroughs and bilingual status.
Yes.
We know that around 40 or 50% have already said, okay, we had a city council meeting, we consider ourselves bilingual, even though the level of English is not above, say, 50%. In the city of Montreal, if someone wants to continue to get English services from the city, will they be able to, regardless of what's in Bill 96?
So in Bill 96, you're right. The only borough that has the bilingual status is Pierrefonds-Roxborough. Then there's the other cities on the island, but they have their own rules, if I could say. So what I'm saying is that in a borough where there's many languages, many people from different communities, and NDG is a good example, you have to be able to get services in English, for example. Maybe it's not going to be in the minute, because people will probably speak to you in French first. But we will give you the service that you need in your language. And to me, this is important. And it's not about saying that, like I said, let's not put them against one another. And let's try to be, but let's also recognize that we're the only francophone metropolis in North America, and I think this is a big asset.
What do you think of the idea that Balarama Holness had last week to declare Montreal, make it a bilingual city? He would do it, by the way, because I asked the question, by holding a referendum, Montreal only, and asking people what they thought of the idea.
For me, it's no, I'm not for this idea. And like I said, I'm being very honest here. And because there's other ways to work together, the fact that we're, like I said, the only francophone metropolis. We need to cherish that. And it's not about taking rights from Anglophone. I'm not about that. I will always fight for people to keep their rights. But at the same time, Montreal is a francophone metropolis. And I think that it's fine. And it's the metropolis also of the province of Quebec. This is where we're in, right? But at the same time, recognizing that Anglophone are part of the founders of this city. So this is where there has to be this recognition, being proactive, wanted to give them services because they deserve to have the services. But I don't want to jeopardize this status.
Bill?
I noticed the gloves have come off between you and the former Mayor Coderre, and he accused you or the city of being not safe. He was stuck very close to some gunshots going off somewhere, and he blames somehow the city administration for that. He says the city is very, very dirty, I find that all interesting because these are issues that just come along now as the campaign gets going. I didn't hear much about gun violence talk before, but it's still a major issue.
Oh, absolutely. But see, that's the difference between him and I. I'm not a negative person, and I'm not going to jeopardize the recovery we're trying to put together by saying that Montreal is dangerous, that Montreal is dirty. I just think it's minimizing and putting down all the efforts by the economic sector, the food sector, the tourism sector. Like what I don't think it's the way to go. That being said, we've been really proactive in adapting to the situation because what we're going through as a city in terms of public safety is something we're seeing everywhere. And we've worked with the SPVM, putting together a special squad for gun trafficking. I've been very loud and clear about other level of governments that needs to take their responsibilities, because if every time we take a gun out of the street of Montreal, there's 10 that comes around by the American border, I mean, it's discouraging. So I feel like I'm going to continue to be this candidate that adapts, just like I did during the COVID, being efficient, resilient, but also positive, because people don't see their city as being dangerous. They don't see their city as being entirely dirty. Doesn't mean that there's no place for improvement. But I really think this is the wrong way to go, and it can be the negative one.
There was a recent survey in Time Out magazine, in fact, I wrote about
there you go.
Sixth best city in the world to live in.
Yes.
And like the only Canadian city in that group of like 37 in point of fact. So I'm guessing, and this is not Montrealers voting; these are urbanites from all over the world.
Well, that kind of proves my point. Is that yes, it's okay to be worried about public safety because we want to continue to be a safe city, but it's almost like throwing the baby with the water. And by wanting to attack me, he attacks police officers, he attacks communities, he attacks people that are doing their best to be the best. And actually, we are recognized as being an amazing city to live in.
I just want to pick up on that because I want to talk about the city cleanliness. Because the three of us here, long-standing, half a century I've lived in this city.
My whole life.
Depressing, yes. But really, one thing that has come up, and this is pre-pandemic, and this has been going on for a long time, is the tagging and the graffiti in the city. So, I mean, I have seen overflowing garbages in parks at certain times, etc. But I've got to say, as a Montrealer, the amount of tagging and graffiti, and yet I hear that this is a very difficult problem to solve, because when people are tagging, or kids, or it might be my grandmother, I don't know, but whoever is doing it, maybe it's my kids. But apparently the fines are very small, and they'd let people off for nothing. And I just find the city, if I had one thing I could change, the amount of graffiti
graffitis,
and tagging,
absolutely.
especially in abandoned restaurants. The Main is a very sad street compared to my youth. Not only empty locales, restaurants, but once they're empty, they get tagged and they get.
True.
And a lot of restaurant owners, back to the restaurant owners, are complaining that
Maybe
when
because
they're
it might be their neighbor,
well,
right?
or them, or at night
Yes.
they come into their place. There was a beautiful bakery on Outwater, and he came to work one day, and the whole thing was tagged, and he had to clean it off. So,
Well, so
could there
I
be
want to that
stronger
point.
fines?
You know, the mayor this week, Denny Coderre, actually came out and said, I believe, as part of his platform, that he would arrange to have graffiti tagging
Right.
removed in 24 hours.
But I hear
mean,
it's the
is that even
judges who are
believable?
letting kids off too easily.
come
That's
in the
what
middle
Luc
of the night.
Ferrandez told me. That's what he
Well,
told
I mean, I think we're used to. I'm used to have the Nicodère coming up with an easy, simple solution for a complex
But it's not
issue.
that simple,
Because
this
there you
one.
go.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, we can all agree that we can do better, and we don't want graffitis. And like you were saying, on business streets, it breaks my heart because
Right.
so much effort are being put on taking care of buildings. So
Art, sorry to interrupt
No,
you,
no,
but
no, it's
apparently
okay.
the graffiti people are saying to me, but it's art.
It's art,
I'm
yes,
all for
I
art.
know.
But the crazy
yeah.
tagging,
We
the
have a
crazy
mural
tagging,
art
I'm sorry,
festival,
there's
though.
a difference. Sorry about
So
that.
we've created spaces so graffiti, arts graffitis can be done. So that
Right.
was a way to bring people, in that community to have spaces to do graffitis. But to me, I will not let those graffitis on a business street because then it just doesn't support. So we need to occupy those small businesses that are empty. We need, and this is part of our platform, and we've said it for a long time because we support small local business streets. And as for the graffitis themselves, we have decided when we took office that even though graffitis are not on our, on our infrastructure, I don't know if you've seen, but the one under the children. Is awful, right? That doesn't belong to the city of Montreal, but we've been talking about saying, okay, it should be the government of Quebec with their team to do it, but then we're saying, okay, we'll do it because it's going to be easier. Same thing on some pieces that belongs to the federal. So we're trying to push it because there's on our territory, and then it's what doesn't belong to us. But we're trying to be proactive.
Polls.
Yes.
Very interesting. Before,
I know.
Before Mr. Coderre even announced he was, 20 points ahead of you?
Yes.
And in the latest, you're pretty much neck and neck.
Yeah.
Not necking, but neck and neck. And
Yeah, that no.
and that's got to be very encouraging
Yes.
to you
Yes.
because I wouldn't know how to have guessed what
Right.
this. How do you feel about that?
But let me stop you there. That's really interesting
Yeah.
because you're now in a virtual dead heat, according to the last polls, 1 percentage point. That also means at the same time that half of Montrealers polled think he would be a better choice for mayor than you would. So what do you say to them, to those people who still think Denny Coderre is the person they want to vote for? How have things become better in the city since you became mayor?
So two things. First is I don't look so much about like we're coude à coude, side by side. It's more the fact that we've grown and we've gained points versus he have lost so many points. So that is but tendencies are important. To me, it is more important than the actual numbers because it shows that we are capable of adapting. We've been listening to Montrealers. I do door to door. My teams are everywhere. We're meeting people. We're there for them. And a campaign, that's what it's all about. Now, the fact that what it also shows me is that nothing can be taken for granted. But it's okay because I've never taken anything for granted because if I would have, I don't think I would be here today. So I will continue to do so. I will bring this positive energy post-pandemic that people are looking for because they've had it hard and they want to have a mayor that cares, that is proactive, but also that is positive. And I think I've shown over the years how I can adapt and bring those qualities. And Montreal has the first, the best economic recovery in Canada, the second best in North America. So when I hear people saying, when I hear Coderre saying that Montreal is awful and dangerous, I'm
And
like,
bankrupt.
shame on you. That
He
is,
said, yes.
it goes against all the numbers and all the surveys and billboards.
You were talking about downtown, and Bill had asked the question as well. We know at the same time, beyond the street the street art or that you brought to downtown, there are downtown merchants, smaller merchants especially, who say that yes, the pandemic had nothing to do with you. You obviously could not control that, but it seems that once we get done this, up to a quarter of them, maybe more, may actually go out of business. And they say the city has not helped them enough to try to get through this. How do you help those small merchants who looks like are going to go out of business?
I will never minimize those words coming from businesses because I know they're putting all their heart and money into this. That being said, the City of Montreal invested $100 million into the economic recovery, $25 million just for the downtown core. That includes also restaurants and everything else. What we have to keep in mind, and not that I want to just throw it at the other level of governments, but let's be realistic. I don't have the financial capacity to support all the small businesses to stay alive. That I can't. I cannot even make a deficit. I don't have that ability. But the federal, the provincial has been helping. I've been asking over and over and continuing to do so to ask for more money because to me the downtown core has to be seen as a sector of its own. You know what I mean? Just like aerospatial or AI, it has to be seen as a specific sector. So to me, the best thing I can do is, of course, to support them. We've helped about 10,000 small businesses in navigating into all the programs, everything that was available to them. Putting the foodie scene is important as well. Redoing a lot of streets, and I know it's tough, but it's better to use it now than after the city is vibrant and welcoming. So I'm really trying to put all I can together to support them. But I'm not a magician, and we all know that some of them might not go through. And like I said, it breaks my heart. It does. But the pandemic have hit us really hard.
We are in the borough of Côte-des-Neiges,
Yes.
NDG, as you know. People here have felt perhaps a little left out and
Right.
isolated because they are represented by a party, well, not a party, an independent mayor of the borough who has broken off with you.
Right.
And a lot of people here feel that they have been denied services as a consequence because there's no one serving their interests.
It breaks my heart, to be honest. That is, NDG Côte-des-Neiges, to me, represents...
Largest borough in the city.
That's it. It represents Montreal has its best. We have everything here. Different communities, different languages, different business trees, different area. Anyway, I love this borough, and I'm very disappointed that we weren't able to bring our vision forward for the population here in terms of housing, in terms of finding options for public transit, because it's quite hard to navigate close to Côte Saint-Luc, you know, on Queen Mary as well. It's tough. So I'm disappointed that this is why I will be pushing forward. We have a great team now. The mayor, the candidate is amazing for Projet Montréal, and I'm fully dedicated like I was before. And unfortunately, Madame Montgomery could not guarantee a healthy working environment, and there was harassment, and that is part of my values. I couldn't stand having, a person that doesn't fight for a healthy working environment. But the next term with our team, we're gonna fight, and we're gonna upgrade the borough.
The acrimony doesn't help.
It doesn't, and nobody needs that, especially in NDG Côte-des-Neiges, where we need to tackle so many important issues. And so what I want to tell citizens here, but also Montrealers, is that the team that we are presenting right now in NDG Côte-des-Neiges has the competencies to bring NDG to the level it deserves, and the attention and the love, and no fighting. I don't want any more fighting. It's not what we need at all in here.
Do you have another
Yeah,
question?
I
Go
do
ahead.
have one more question. And I have to admit, when Saint-Denis Street was under construction, when the bike paths were being put in and the larger sidewalks.
Yeah, that was a tough period.
Yeah, I lost it more than once, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
And I was on Saint-Denis Street recently, and I've got to say, it is a beautiful. What's happened to Saint-Denis Street to me is wonderful. One thing that's great are that people are actually respecting the crosswalks on Saint-Denis.
I know. Isn't that
has
great?
been the most difficult street to cross in Montreal. My sister and I would have bets on that street if we could
I love
cross.
that we're actually saluting the fact that people are respecting
Yeah,
crosswalks
right.
No,
in Montreal.
isn't that something?
That's
Because we
wonderful,
talked about
yeah.
it in a previous podcast that it was a dangerous city for
I still don't take
pedestrians.
my chances.
Well,
in Toronto,
I-
you'd get executed.
I know, but I'll tell you, on Saint Denis Street, to me, is a big success of yours. The bike paths were full of people of all ages. I mean, I'm only worried about sometimes getting hit by a bike because I don't look around enough because we're not used to them. But this was, to me, this is a major success of yours, this bike path and the development of this street. Hopefully the businesses will come because there's still a lot of empty locations because that was a golden street for so many years. However, there has been a lot of talk by your opponent about removing bike paths in the future if he is elected mayor. How do you see bike paths? Are you going to keep building them? Are there too many? Have they been well planned? Or is just the future of cities like Paris and Vienna, European cities with different climates, mind you, but to keep the bike paths going as a future for Montreal?
There has to be a planning. For me, it's not about transforming all the streets with a cycling path. It has to be strategic. We need to consult. We need to put it. For example, the Rêve Saint-Denis, it took 3 years before we started to do it, to construct it, because there had to be real, like a real planning around it. Versus, for example, last year, I decided to do a cycling path during COVID on Christophe Colomb, and it was to support people to move around. And I heard that people were saying, it wasn't planned. And I said, okay, I understand. I wanted to help. I wanted to make the city more safe for everybody, but it was not the right way to go. When I said that I adapt, that's what I do.
The one-way streets as well. There was,
On
making
which one?
I think it was Notre Dame, was it? There was a lot of
Oh,
talk,
right, on
but-
de la Commune.
Okay,
On de la Commune.
okay.
So I think, and I'm not afraid to say that sometimes when something, even with good intentions, sometimes if it doesn't exactly fit, for example, reducing the construction site, we know we need to remove, improve the city. But if at one point people are like, oh, okay, we'll adapt. So Saint-Denis, I'm proud because we can walk, we can cross the street in a safe way, we can hear each other.
You can park actually on
And you
Saint-Denis,
can park
yeah.
because we've got 80% of all the parking. And what I'm seeing is new businesses. So when we decided to do it, there was 2 reasons. First, security, because it's just on Saint-Denis, since 2015, there was about 300 hits, like people that got hit. Cyclists, but also pedestrians. So it was a safety issue. But also it was about re-questioning the status quo because businesses are closing. It's not because of cycling path, or it's because businesses are changing. The businesses, if everybody's going now on Amazon, and that's the reality. So we need to attract people, and we've had this conversation just earlier. I want to compete with Amazon, and I want to compete with the shopping malls. So we need to make it fun, enjoyable, a great place to go. And I believe this is working so well, and 7,000 people are now using the Rêve every day.
Wow.
All right, we are out of time. I want to thank you for having done this. I do have one last question. I posted this on Facebook to ask people if they'd like to ask you something. And my favorite question was, do you own a car, and where's your secret parking spot downtown?
I don't own a car. In my house, I have a parking space. And
when you go downtown, no special place to...
No, because, I'm the mayor, so I actually have somebody that drives me around. So I'm stuck in traffic a lot,
Okay.
I have to say. So I get it.
Old
I
Montreal
understand.
too. I'd like to know the parking spot in Old
Secret
Montreal.
one.
Yeah,
Secret
I don't-
parking space.
I'd like to finish with a tiny question. Is there a year that we won't see so much construction in Montreal? Is there an end game
that's a good
here
question.
that we
Right.
won't be navigating streets
For
like
the
we
city
are?
of Montreal, it's a 10-year plan that started with Coder. Coder installed this infrastructure kind of improving plan. When we took office, we said, okay, we got to do it because it's falling apart. We're losing water like crazy. We got to do it. But then we can add to it, for example, the Métropolitain, which is the government of Quebec, Hippolyte Lafontaine. But we're working really hard to make it as fluid as possible and dealing with all the difficulties around
One
that.
day, no yellow cones, orange
Yes.
cones.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
here
very
this
much.
morning.
Thank
Very
you.
much
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you
And
so much for having
best of
me.
luck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.